Rain lashed against my apartment window, mimicking the storm raging inside me. "Mom, I need you to understand," Jean said, her voice barely a whisper. Her eyes, usually so bright, were clouded with a pain I hadn't seen since her father's funeral. I reached across the small table, my hand covering hers. "Sweetheart, you know you can tell me anything." She flinched, pulling away slightly. "That hurt more than any slap. It's hard to talk about." Jean twisted the silver ring on her finger, a nervous habit I recognized. "It's about Julian and his parents." Julian. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. His parents, Rebecca and Marcus Chen, had seemed like such a blessing at first. They'd practically adopted Jean after her father died, offering her room in their sprawling home, showering her with affection and gifts. I'd been so relieved, so grateful. A single mother, struggling to make ends meet. I couldn't offer Jean the life she deserved. The Chens, with their seemingly endless generosity, had stepped in to fill the void. They'd even encouraged her relationship with Julian, a charming young man who seemed utterly devoted to my daughter. I'd thought my Jean had finally found happiness again. How wrong I was. They weren't what they seemed, Mom. Jean's voice cracked, and tears finally spilled down her cheeks. They were monsters. My blood ran cold. Monsters. "What are you talking about, darling?" I gripped her hand again, this time refusing to let go. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a terror I'd hoped never to see again. "They drugged me, Mom. Kept me locked in their basement for 3 years. 3 years. 3 years stolen from my daughter's life. 3 years of unimaginable horror." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I wanted to scream, to rage, to tear the world apart with my bare hands. But I forced myself to stay calm, to be the anchor Jean so desperately needed. "Tell me everything," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake shaking my soul. Jean's story unfolded slowly, punctuated by sobs and silences. She described how the Chens, initially so loving and supportive, had gradually begun to control every aspect of her life. They'd isolated her from her friends, monitored her phone calls, dictated what she could wear and eat. Then came the vitamins, pills Rebecca insisted Jean take daily for her anxiety, pills that turned out to be powerful sedatives, slowly stripping Jean of her will, her memories, her very self. And finally, the basement, a cold, damp cell with a single bare bulb, where Jean spent 3 years of her life, lost in a drug-induced haze, barely aware of her own existence. I listened, my stomach churning, bile rising in my throat. My sweet, vibrant Jean, reduced to a prisoner in the home of the people she'd trusted most. The people I'd trusted. My guilt was a physical weight, crushing me beneath its immense burden. I'd failed her. I'd handed her over to these monsters, blinded by my own relief, my own inadequacy. How did you escape?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. Jean took a deep breath, her gaze hardening. "There was a fire, a small one, in the kitchen. It had distracted them. I managed to break the lock on the basement door. I ran. She shivered, pulling her cardigan tight around her. I ran, and I didn't stop running until I reached a police station. The police had investigated, of course, but the Chens, wealthy and influential, had managed to cover their tracks. They claimed Jean was mentally unstable, that she'd imagined the whole thing. They produced doctors who testified to her fragile mental state. The fire, they said, was an accident, a faulty appliance. The case was closed. No charges were filed. They got away with it, Mom, Jean said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. They got away with everything. I saw the flicker of something dangerous in her eyes, a spark of cold, hard resolve, and in that moment, I knew Jean wasn't just telling me her story. She was asking for help. She was asking me to help her get justice, to help her get revenge. They won't, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I reached across the table and took her hand in mine. This time, she didn't pull away. They won't get away with it. Not while I'm still breathing. I had nothing left to lose. My husband was gone. My daughter had been stolen from me, then returned broken and scarred. But now, a new fire burned within me, a fire of righteous anger, a fire of fierce, unwavering love, a fire that wouldn't be extinguished until the Chens paid for what they'd done. I had a feeling Thanksgiving at their sprawling estate this year was going to be interesting. Rain lashed against the windows of my family practice clinic, blurring the city lights into hazy orange streaks. "Dr. Morris, your 4 o'clock is here," chirped my receptionist, Brenda, through the intercom. I smoothed down my white coat, took a deep breath, and plastered on my professional smile. This was it. This was where it all began. This was where I met Rebecca and Marcus, the couple who would later tear my family apart. Jean, my daughter, hadn't been working at the clinic long, just a few months as a medical assistant. She was still finding her feet, still adjusting to life after her father's passing. I remember the first time she introduced me to them. They were both radiating warmth and concern. "Mom, this is Rebecca and Marcus. They're patients, but also they've been so supportive lately." Rebecca, with her gentle smile and kind eyes, squeezed my hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Morris. Jean has told us so much about you, Marcus. Tall and imposing, yet with a surprisingly soft voice, added, 'We're so sorry for your loss. We're here for Jean if she needs anything at all.'" At the time, their words felt like a lifeline. I was drowning in grief, struggling to keep the practice afloat, and worried sick about my daughter. Their offer of friendship and support seemed like a godsend. Little did I know, it was the beginning of my nightmare. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca and Marcus became fixtures at the clinic. They'd bring Jean lunch, offer to run errands, and even stay late to help with filing. "You're both so kind," I told them one afternoon, as they helped Jean organize patient charts. "It's really appreciated." Marcus chuckled. "It's nothing, really. We enjoy Jean's company, and we admire the work you do, Dr. Morris." Rebecca nodded in agreement. "We both believe in giving back to the community. And Jean, well, she's like family to us now." Hearing those words warmed my heart. Jean seemed genuinely happy to have them in her life, and their presence lightened the load on my shoulders. They often invited Jean over for dinner, or to the theater, or simply to relax at their beautifully appointed home. "They have a pool," Jean gushed one evening, her face flushed with excitement, "and a home theater, and they even have a little dog named Coco." I smiled at her enthusiasm. It was so good to see her smile again, to see the spark return to her eyes. Sounds lovely, sweetheart. Just be careful. I don't want you imposing. Jean rolled her eyes playfully. Mom, they insist. They say I'm like a daughter to them. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Well, that's very sweet of them. Just be careful. Even then, a tiny seed of unease had begun to sprout in the back of my mind. It was something in the intensity of their gaze, the almost possessive way they hovered around Jean. But I dismissed it as my own grief-fueled paranoia. I wanted to believe in their goodness and the possibility of kindness in a world that had suddenly become so cruel. One crisp autumn afternoon, Jean came home from work with unsettling news. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "my landlord is selling the building. He's giving everyone 30 days to vacate." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Jean's apartment, though small, was her sanctuary, her connection to her father. Losing it would be another devastating blow. "Oh, honey," I murmured, pulling her into a hug. "We'll figure something out." "We always do," Jean pulled away, a determined glint in her eyes. "I already have. Rebecca and Marcus offered to let me stay with them, just until I find a new place." My heart sank. This was it. This was the moment I should have intervened, should have put my foot down and said no. But I didn't. I was too exhausted, too overwhelmed by my own grief, to fight the inevitable. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Absolutely," Jean replied, her voice firm. "They insist. They said there's plenty of room, and they'd love to have me." I managed a weak smile. "Well, if you're sure." I looked at my daughter, her face alight with relief, and I told myself it would be okay. I told myself they were good people, kind people. I told myself I was being foolishly overprotective. But deep down, a cold, hard knot of fear had begun to form in my stomach. It was a fear that would haunt me for the next 3 years, a fear that would fuel my every waking moment, until the day I finally discovered the truth about Rebecca and Marcus, and the horrifying secret they had been hiding in their seemingly perfect home. Because what I didn't know then, what I wouldn't discover until much later, was that their offer of help was a carefully crafted trap, a sinister plot designed to isolate and control my daughter, and that their kindness was nothing more than a thin veneer, masking a darkness I could never have imagined. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the air heavy and still. The silence was broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, each tick a stark reminder of the precious time I had already lost with my daughter. Rain lashed against the basement window, a blurry, distorted view of the world outside. Another Christmas had come and gone. Another Thanksgiving, even Easter, with its promise of rebirth, had mocked me from the confines of this damp, concrete prison. 3 years. 3 years since Rebecca and Marcus, the couple I'd foolishly called my friends, my surrogate family, locked me in this basement. 3 years since I last saw the sun, felt the grass beneath my feet, heard the genuine laughter of someone who didn't consider me their plaything. I remember the early days, the slow creep of their control. "Jean, dear, why don't you stay for dinner?" Rebecca would say, her smile so warm, so welcoming. Marcus would chime in, "We insist. We love having you round." After my parents died, their kindness had been a balm to my grief. They offered me a room in their spacious house, a place to heal, a place to call home. You're practically family now, Jean, Marcus had said, clapping me on the shoulder. How could I have been so blind? The medicine started subtly. Just a little something to help me sleep, they said, to calm my nerves. It made me drowsy, disoriented. Then came the increased doses, the locked doors, the gaslighting. You're imagining things, Jean. Rebecca would coo, her eyes full of feigned concern. You're not well. We're just trying to help. Help. Their version of help was a concrete cell with a single bare bulb and a bucket for a toilet. Time became a shapeless, formless thing down here. The days bled into weeks, the weeks into months, the months into years. I marked the passage of time by the changing quality of the light filtering through that grimy window, the pale yellow of spring, the harsh glare of summer, the muted orange of autumn, and always the relentless gray of winter. I tried to keep my mind occupied. I exercised, pacing the length of my cell, doing push-ups against the damp wall. I talked to myself, reciting poetry I remembered from school, singing songs my mother used to hum, anything to keep the silence, the loneliness, at bay. Sometimes I would hear their muffled voices upstairs, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, the sounds of a normal life, a life I'd once known, a life they'd stolen from me. On holidays, the sounds were more festive. Laughter, music, the aroma of roasting turkey or ham wafting down the stairs. The cruelest torture of all. Happy Thanksgiving, Jean, Rebecca would call down, her voice dripping with false cheer. We've saved you some leftovers of a life I no longer had. One day, I found a loose brick in the wall. It was small, almost insignificant, but it gave me hope. Hope that I could claw my way out of this hellhole, brick by brick. If I had to, I started digging, painstakingly, using a shard of metal I'd found in my food. The work was slow, agonizing, but the thought of escape fueled me. I imagined Julian, my fiancé. He must think I'd abandoned him. He probably thought I was dead. The thought of his pain, the pain I'd unwittingly caused, was another spur. I had to get out. I had to find him. I had to explain. The hole grew larger, slowly but surely. I worked at night, when Rebecca and Marcus were asleep. The scraping of the metal against the brick was the only sound, a counterpoint to the drumming of my heart. One night, I heard Rebecca say to Marcus, "I'm worried about Jean, darling. She's been so quiet lately." Marcus chuckled. "Let her sulk. It's her own fault she's down there." His words were a punch to the gut, but they also strengthened my resolve. I would show them what it meant to underestimate Jean Morris. I started hoarding scraps of food, saving them for the day I finally broke free. Every crumb, every morsel, was a symbol of my defiance. I pictured myself walking out of that basement, blinking in the sunlight, a free woman. I pictured the look on Rebecca and Marcus's faces when they realized I was gone. The thought sustained me through the long, dark hours. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew the world outside would be different, changed. But I also knew I was stronger now, harder. They had tried to break me, but they had failed. They had only made me more determined to reclaim my life. The holidays, once a source of torment, now became a beacon of hope. I told myself, next Christmas, I will be free, and I clung to that thought, a lifeline in the darkness, a promise whispered in the silence. The rain outside intensified, mirroring the storm raging within me. But this time, the storm felt different. It felt like the precursor to something new, something powerful. It felt like the beginning of my revenge. Rain lashed against the basement window, a blurry gray smear against the concrete. Another day bled into the next, marked only by the changing shifts of light filtering through that grimy pane. 3 Thanksgivings had come and gone, 3 Christmases, 3 Easters, 3 years since Rebecca, with a saccharine smile, had said, "Jean, dear, you're just not yourself lately. Why don't you rest here for a little while?" That little while had stretched into an eternity within these 4 walls. The early days were a blur of confusion. A glass of water, offered with a gentle, "You look tired, sweetheart." Then another, and another, waking up disoriented, sluggish. "You've been overworking yourself, darling," Marcus would say, his voice full of concern. "We just want to help you get better." They began managing my phone calls, intercepting my mail. "Just until you're feeling more like yourself, Jean," Rebecca would chime in, her hand resting on my arm, a touch that felt less like comfort and more like a cage. My friends, Julian included, started to drift away. "We're worried about you, Jean," they'd say. "Rebecca says you're not well." "I'm fine," I'd insist, but my voice lacked conviction, even to my own ears. Rebecca and Marcus had woven their web so subtly, so insidiously, that even I began to question my own sanity. They'd whisper to each other just out of earshot, their heads closed together, then turn to me with looks of pity. "Jean, dear, you really need to rest," Rebecca would say, guiding me back to my room, my prison. The basement became my world. A cot, a chair, a small table, books, carefully chosen by Rebecca, filled with stories of troubled minds and miraculous recoveries. "These will help you, darling," she'd say, placing them on the table. I'd flip through the pages, the words blurring together, my mind struggling to grasp their meaning. I felt like a puppet, my strings being pulled by unseen hands. My own thoughts, my own desires, seemed to fade away, replaced by a dull, pervasive numbness. The holidays were the worst. The muffled sounds of laughter and celebration filtering down from above, a constant reminder of the life I'd lost. I remembered Thanksgiving dinners with my family, the aroma of roasting turkey filling the air, the warmth of togetherness. Now, Thanksgiving was a plate of bland food left outside my door, eaten in silence, the only sound the gnawing emptiness in my heart. Christmas was a single, unwrapped gift, a self-help book, its pages filled with empty promises. Easter, a hollow echo of childhood egg hunts and family gatherings, replaced by the cold, damp concrete of my basement prison. They controlled everything: my food, my clothes, my sleep, even my thoughts, it seemed. They'd bring down articles about successful therapies, about people overcoming their challenges. "See, Jean, you're not alone," Marcus would say, his voice dripping with false empathy. But I saw through their charade. I knew I wasn't sick. I knew I was being held captive. But how could I prove it? Who would believe me? They had isolated me so completely, painted me so convincingly as a fragile, unstable woman that even my closest friends had turned away. One day, Marcus brought down a box of old photographs. "We thought you might like to see these, Jean," he said, a strange glint in his eye. They were pictures of my family, my parents, my friends, my life before. He watched me as I flipped through them, my heart aching with a mixture of longing and rage. "Remember these happy times, Jean?" Rebecca asked softly, joining us in the basement. "We want you to be happy again." But her words were like poison, twisting the knife in my wound. That night, as I lay on my cot, staring at the damp ceiling, a single thought began to take root in my mind. A seed of defiance, watered by my anger, nourished by my despair. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let them steal my life. I would get out, and when I did, I would make them pay. I didn't know how yet, but the thought of their impending downfall was the only thing that kept me going. I started to observe them more closely, listening intently to their conversations, searching for a weakness, a crack in their carefully constructed facade. I knew they thought they had me completely under their control. They were wrong. The game was far from over. It had just begun, and I would have the last word. Their casual mention of a trip, a holiday home somewhere warm, sparked a flicker of an idea, a dangerous spark in the darkness of my confinement. It was a long shot, but it was all I had, and I clung to it like a lifeline. Rain lashed against the basement window, a blurry gray smear against the grimy glass. Another day, another wave of nausea washing over me. "Jean, darling, are you awake?" Rebecca's voice, saccharine sweet, grated on my nerves even through the fog in my head. I blinked, trying to focus on the damp concrete wall opposite me. "I think so," I mumbled, my throat dry and scratchy. A metal plate slid across the floor, rattling against the uneven concrete. "Your lunch, dear," Rebecca chirped. "Eat up. You need your strength." The food, some kind of bland stew, looked vaguely unsettling. I picked at it with the plastic spoon, my stomach churning. "It's single quotes as good," I lied, forcing a swallow. Rebecca smiled, a tight, unsettling smile. "That's good to hear. We wouldn't want you getting sick down here, would we?" She didn't wait for an answer, just turned and left, her footsteps echoing up the wooden stairs. The heavy metal door clanged shut, plunging me back into the dim, silent solitude. This had become my routine. Wake up disoriented, eat the food Rebecca brought, try to piece together the fragmented memories swirling in my head. I remembered moving in with Rebecca and Marcus after my landlord unexpectedly raised my rent. They'd seemed so kind, so eager to help. Rebecca, with her warm smile and motherly touch, had been a lifeline when I felt so alone after my parents passed. Marcus, quiet and reserved, had always been there with a comforting presence. They'd offered me their spare room, insisted I stay as long as I needed. It had felt like a miracle. Now, trapped in their basement, I wondered if I'd imagined it all. The kindness, the support, the sense of belonging. Had it all been a lie? The last clear memory I had was of laughing with Rebecca in the kitchen, a glass of wine in my hand. After that, everything was blurry, fragmented, days bleeding into weeks, weeks into months. The constant grogginess, the disorientation, the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. One day, I found a shard of broken mirror tucked beneath a loose floorboard. My reflection startled me. My hair was matted, my skin pale and drawn. My eyes, once bright and full of life, were now dull and shadowed. I barely recognized myself. That was the day the fog began to lift, the day I started to remember. The insistent offers of tea, the way Rebecca always insisted on refilling my glass. The times I'd woken up in my bed, fully clothed, with no memory of how I got there. The pieces began to fit together, forming a chilling picture. They hadn't been helping me, they'd been drugging me, controlling me, keeping me prisoner in their own home. Why? The question echoed in my mind, a constant, agonizing refrain. What had I done to deserve this? I racked my brain, searching for an answer, but came up empty. Time became a meaningless blur. Days were marked only by the meals Rebecca brought, the changing patterns of light filtering through the grimy basement window. I tried to keep track, scratching marks on the wall with a loose nail I'd found. But the drugged haze made it difficult to think clearly, to hold on to any sense of time. One day, Rebecca brought me a new blanket. "It's getting colder, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Wouldn't want you to catch a chill." As she tucked the blanket around me, I noticed something in her pocket, a small, leather-bound book. It looked familiar. Later, when she was gone, I searched frantically through the meager belongings I'd been allowed to keep. My purse. It was gone. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. That was my journal, the one I'd kept since I was a child, filled with my innermost thoughts, my hopes, my dreams. Why would she have it? Unless she was reading it, spying on my most private thoughts. A surge of anger coursed through me, a burning ember in the desolate landscape of my despair. It was a small thing, a tiny spark, but it was enough to ignite a flicker of hope, a nascent resolve. They thought they had broken me, reduced me to a silent, compliant shadow. They were wrong. I would get out of here. I would find a way to escape. And when I did, they would pay for what they had done. I would make sure of it. I closed my eyes, clutching the shard of mirror like a talisman. I whispered to myself, a promise in the darkness. I will have my revenge. The rain continued to fall, a relentless drumming against the glass. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the cold. I felt the heat of a slow-burning fire, the promise of a reckoning to come. I just needed to figure out how. The crisp, sterile air of Dr. Patterson's family practice clinic did little to soothe the tremor in my hands. I clutched my purse, the worn leather a familiar comfort against the rising tide of anxiety. "So, Mrs. Morris, Dr. Patterson said, his voice gentle, "you've been experiencing these episodes for how long?" "Just over a month now," I replied, my voice catching slightly. It started subtly, just a fleeting dizziness. But now I trailed off, a shiver running down my spine. "Now they're more intense," Dr. Patterson prompted. I nodded, unable to articulate the strange, almost hallucinatory nature of the episodes. Like I'm losing time. One minute I'm making coffee. The next I'm staring out the window, hours gone with no memory of what happened. Dr. Patterson leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concern. "And you mentioned some disorientation." "Yes," I confirmed, like I'm in a dream. Familiar places feel wrong, somehow, and I get these intense headaches afterward, unlike anything I've ever experienced. He made a note on his chart. Have you experienced any significant stress lately, Mrs.? Any changes in your life? My mind flashed to Julian, to Jean, to the Thanksgiving dinner that had ended with my daughter and her fiancé coldly dismissing me. Their words echoing in my ears. You're embarrassing, Mom. We can't have you round anymore. The sting of their rejection was still fresh, a constant ache beneath my ribs. Some family issues, I managed, my voice tight. Nothing I can't handle. He nodded, seeming to accept my vague answer. We'll run some tests. Mrs. Morris, blood work, a neurological exam just to rule out anything serious. It could be stress-related, as you say, but we want to be thorough. I thanked him, relief washing over me, however fleeting. As I left the clinic, a new thought, a seed of an idea, began to take root in my mind. What if these episodes weren't just stress? What if they were something else, something I could use? The next few days were a blur of appointments and tests. I went through the motions, answering the doctor's questions, all the while nurturing that nascent idea, turning it over and over in my mind. During one of these dizzy spells, I found myself staring at a framed photo of Jean and Julian, their smiling faces mocking me from the mantelpiece. And that's when it hit me. The perfect plan. A way to use their callous disregard against them, to reclaim what they had so carelessly taken from me, my home, my life, my dignity. The plan required meticulous preparation, a delicate dance of timing and manipulation. I started small, feigning increasing forgetfulness, leaving bills unpaid, misplacing important documents. Mom, are you all right? Jean asked one afternoon, a flicker of something akin to concern in her eyes. I'm just overwhelmed, dear, I replied, my voice trembling with practiced fragility. It's all getting to be a bit much. Julian, ever pragmatic, suggested I hire a financial advisor, someone to help manage my affairs. It's for the best, Mrs. Morris, he said, his tone smooth, yet laced with condescension. We don't want you making any rash decisions. I acquiesced, playing the role of the confused, aging mother to perfection. Little did they know, I was already pulling the strings, setting the stage for my grand performance. I contacted a lawyer, a shrewd, discreet woman named Ms. Evans, who specialized in estate planning. I want to establish a trust, I told her, my voice firm, the tremor gone, a reversible living trust, and I want my daughter and her fiancé to be the trustees. Ms. Evans raised an eyebrow, but offered no judgment. And the beneficiaries, she asked. For now, I said, a sly smile playing on my lips, myself, but I reserve the right to change that at any time. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously transferred my assets into the trust, my house, my savings, everything. I even arranged for my monthly Social Security checks to be deposited directly into the trust account. Jean and Julian, blinded by their own greed, readily signed the documents, eager to assume control of what they believed was rightfully theirs. They even planned a lavish Christmas party at my house, their house, as they now saw it, inviting all their friends to celebrate their newfound prosperity. I watched their preparations with a detached amusement, a quiet satisfaction simmering beneath the surface. They had no idea what was coming. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my vulnerability for weakness. On Christmas Eve, as they finalized the decorations, preening themselves for their grand soiree, I slipped out of the house unnoticed. I drove to the airport, a one-way ticket to the Caribbean tucked safely in my purse. The warm tropical breeze greeted me as I stepped off the plane, a stark contrast to the biting winter air I had left behind. I checked into a luxurious beachfront villa, the sound of the waves a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. As I sipped a cool drink on my private balcony, overlooking the turquoise waters, I imagined Jean and Julian's faces the next morning when they discovered the truth. The trust was reversible, and I had reversed it. Every last penny, every asset, now belonged to a charitable organization dedicated to rescuing abandoned animals, a cause I had always held dear. I had given them the best Christmas gift they would never receive, the gift of nothing. The air in Rebecca and Marcus's house felt thick with a manufactured concern, a suffocating sweetness that coated every interaction. "Jean, darling," Rebecca began one afternoon, her hand fluttering to her chest, "we're just so worried. You seem distant." I offered a weak smile, stirring the iced tea Julian had brought me earlier. "Just tired," I murmured, my voice a carefully practiced monotone. Tired of the charade. Tired of pretending I hadn't seen the knowing glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. Tired of the subtle digs at my fragile mental state. "It's understandable, dear," Marcus chimed in, his tone laced with fox sympathy. "After all you've been through," he trailed off, letting the insinuation hang in the air like a bad smell. "Though all I've been through, of course, being the fabricated narrative they'd woven round me, the story of a young woman on the brink, teetering on the edge of a breakdown. It was their justification, their shield against suspicion, their way of isolating me from the outside world. Perhaps a little getaway would do you good," Rebecca suggested brightly a few days later. "A change of scenery can work wonders." My heart quickened. "A getaway? Where with them?" "I don't know." I hedged, trying to sound appropriately hesitant, playing my role. "I'm not sure I'm up for it." "Nonsense," Marcus boomed, clapping a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that felt far too familiar, far too possessive. "A little fresh air will do you the world of good." We were thinking of that charming little cabin by the lake. "Remember, Jean, the one you loved so much, the one where they'd accidentally locked me out in the freezing rain, claiming I'd wandered off in a fugue state." Another incident added to their growing list of proof of my instability. "Oh, yes," I said softly, forcing a smile. "That sounds lovely." The charade continued, intensifying with each passing day. They monitored my every move, scrutinized my every expression, documented every perceived slip-up. They'd even started leaving journals lying around, filled with fabricated entries detailing my supposed descent into madness. "Jean, dear," Rebecca cooed one morning, holding up a journal, "are you sure you're feeling all right? You wrote some concerning things in here." I glanced at the open page, my stomach churning. The handwriting was a clumsy imitation of mine, the content a disturbing tapestry of paranoia and delusion. "Don't remember writing that," I stammered, feigning confusion. "Oh, darling," Rebecca sighed, her voice dripping with condescending pity. Perhaps we should consider professional help. For your own good, of course. We only want what's best for you, Jean, Marcus echoed, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite decipher. But I knew what they wanted. They wanted control. They wanted to keep me trapped in their web of lies, to isolate me from the world, to make me dependent on them. But I wouldn't let them. I was playing their game, yes, but I was playing it my way. Every feigned stumble, every manufactured memory lapse, every forced smile was a calculated move, a piece of the puzzle I was meticulously assembling. I was biding my time, gathering information, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And as I looked at them, at their carefully constructed facade of concern, I knew that moment was coming. The holidays were approaching. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. They saw these occasions as opportunities to showcase their generosity, to paint themselves as the benevolent caregivers of a troubled young woman. They'd invite friends, neighbors, distant relatives, anyone who would listen to their carefully crafted narrative. I would play my part, the grateful, slightly unhinged guest, accepting their charity with a quiet grace. But behind the mask, I was plotting. I was weaving my own story, a story of betrayal, manipulation, and ultimately, revenge. I would use their holiday gatherings against them, exposing their lies to the very people they sought to impress. I would turn their carefully constructed world upside down, revealing the monsters lurking beneath the surface. I would reclaim my life, my sanity, my freedom, and I would make them pay for every moment of suffering they had inflicted upon me. The thought, a burning ember in the pit of my stomach, fueled my resolve. Their reign of terror was coming to an end. My reign was about to begin. The first step, ensuring Julian was safely away, far from the impending storm. He wouldn't understand. Not yet. The crisp autumn air nipped at my exposed skin as I stood on Rebecca and Marcus's porch, a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. "You're being dramatic, Mom," Jean had said, rolling her eyes when I'd suggested postponing the Thanksgiving visit. "They love you. They're practically family." Little did she know how right she was about the family part. I'd sensed something amiss for months, a subtle shift in their demeanor, a flicker of something cold behind their smiles. But Jean, blinded by their apparent generosity, dismissed my concerns. Now, as their front door swung open, revealing Rebecca's strained smile, I knew my gut feeling had been right. "So glad you could make it," Rebecca chirped, ushering me inside. Marcus trailed behind her, his greeting a touch too hearty, his eyes a touch too bright. The house, usually impeccably decorated, felt sterile, almost staged. The scent of cinnamon and nutmeg, usually a comforting aroma, now seemed cloying, artificial. "Jean will be so thrilled you're here," Marcus said, his voice booming a little too loudly. "She's just upstairs, getting ready." "Getting ready for what?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Rebecca exchanged a quick glance with Marcus, the mask of cordiality slipping for a fraction of a second. "Oh, just a little surprise we have planned," Rebecca said, her smile tightening at the corners. "A Thanksgiving to remember." You could say my unease intensified. Something was definitely wrong. "Where is Julian?" I asked, noticing his absence. Jean and Julian were inseparable. especially round holidays. I running a little late, Marcus stammered, avoiding my gaze. Car trouble, you know how it is. I didn't buy it. Julian was meticulous about his car. Car trouble on Thanksgiving Day, impossible. I'll just go up and see Jean, I announced, making my way towards the staircase. Actually, Rebecca said, blocking my path, why don't we all gather in the living room first? We have a few things to discuss. Her tone was no longer sweet. It was laced with steel. I paused, my hand tightening on the banister. Discuss, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, discuss, Marcus echoed, stepping closer. He and Rebecca flanked me like guards. Their smiles were gone, replaced by expressions I'd never seen before, cold, calculating, almost predatory. The living room felt like a cage. The curtains were drawn, casting the room in a dim, oppressive light. Rebecca and Marcus sat on the sofa, their posture rigid, their eyes fixed on me. I sat opposite them, my heart pounding in my chest. We need to talk about Jean's future, Rebecca began, her voice devoid of any warmth. And your role in it. My role, I asked, bewildered. What do you mean? Rebecca leaned forward, her eyes glinting. We've been very generous to Jean, haven't we? She didn't wait for my reply. We took her in when she had nowhere else to go. We provided for her, cared for her, treated her like our own. And we've decided it's time she started showing some gratitude. Marcus added, his voice a low growl. I stared at them, trying to make sense of their words. Gratitude. What are you talking about? We're talking about assets. Mom, Rebecca said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. About securing Jean's future and ours. We know about the trust fund, Marcus said bluntly. The one your late husband set up for Jean. My blood ran cold. How did they know about that? It was a closely guarded secret, known only to a handful of people. We've been patient, Rebecca continued, but our patience is wearing thin. We expect Jean to sign over her assets to us. It's the least she can do after all we've done for her. I finally understood. This wasn't about family, about kindness, about love. It was about money. They had been grooming Jean, manipulating her, waiting for the moment they could seize control of her inheritance. My fear was quickly replaced by anger, a cold, hard anger that burned in my gut. You won't get away with this, I said, my voice trembling but resolute. Rebecca and Marcus laughed, a chilling, hollow sound. Oh, but we already have, Rebecca said, her eyes gleaming with malice. At that moment, the basement door creaked open. 2 figures emerged, their faces pale and gaunt. It was Jean and Julian, their eyes vacant, their movements sluggish. They were clearly drugged. My heart sank. Rebecca and Marcus had already won. They had Jean, they had Julian, and they had their sights set on her fortune. But something in their smug expression sparked a flicker of hope in me. They thought they had won. They thought they had everything under control. But they hadn't accounted for one thing: a mother's love and a mother's wrath. This Thanksgiving, I wouldn't be giving thanks. I would be serving revenge. My mind raced, formulating a plan, a way to turn the tables on these monsters. I had to be smart. I had to be cunning. And most importantly, I had to be patient. My time would come. The damp chill of the basement had become a second skin. 3 years. 3 years I'd spent staring at the same four walls, listening to the muffled sounds of their laughter echoing from above. 3 years since Rebecca, with a sickly sweet smile, had said, "Oh, darling, your family now. We'll take care of everything." That everything turned out to be locking me away, stealing my life, my daughter Jean's future, piece by agonizing piece. They drugged me, at first, just a little something in my tea. They'd said, to help me sleep, to help me adjust. "It's for your own good," Marcus had chimed in, his eyes cold and calculating. The sleep turned into a haze, the haze into lost days, then weeks, then months blurring into the endless, monotonous cycle of captivity. The basement was sparsely furnished: a cot, a bucket, a single bare bulb dangling precariously from the low ceiling, casting grotesque shadows that danced with the dust motes. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something faintly metallic, something that made my stomach churn. Food was sporadic, sometimes a stale piece of bread, other times a bowl of watery soup shoved through the small, barred window high in the wall. "Dinner is served, Your Highness," Rebecca would sneer, her voice dripping with false cheer. I tried talking to them, reasoning, pleading. "Please, Rebecca, what did I do?" I'd ask, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Let me see Jean. Just let me see my daughter." Their responses varied: cruel laughter, dismissive silence, or fabricated tales of Jean flourishing without me. "Jean is doing wonderfully," Julian would say, his tone a strange mix of smugness and something else, something that felt performative. Lies, all lies. I clung to the memory of Jean's face, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the sound of her laughter. Those memories were the only things they couldn't steal, the only things that kept me sane in the suffocating darkness. I marked the passage of time by the faint changes in the light filtering through the high window, the pale glow of winter, the strengthening sun of spring, the oppressive heat of summer. I exercised, as best I could, in the cramped space, pacing the length of the basement, doing simple stretches to keep my muscles from atrophying. I had to survive. I had to escape. For Jean. One day, while rummaging through the meager possessions they allowed me, I found a small, rusty nail file. Hope, sharp and unexpected, pierced the gloom. It was slow, painstaking work, but day after day, I chipped away at the mortar around the bricks of the wall near the window. "Giving yourself a manicure, darling," Rebecca mocked one day, peering through the bars. I didn't answer, just continued my work, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Weeks turned into months. The hole grew larger, brick by painstaking brick. I hid the loosened bricks under my cot, covered with the thin, threadbare blanket. "Still playing with your bricks, dear," Marcus sneered on another occasion. "Children's games won't get you anywhere." I kept silent, my resolve hardening with each passing insult. Finally, the hole was large enough. It was a tight squeeze, but I managed to wriggle through, emerging into the cool night air, blinking in the unfamiliar light. I was free, but my escape was just the beginning. I knew where they kept their financial records, a small fireproof safe hidden behind a painting in their study. Over the years, I'd overheard snippets of their conversations, hushed discussions of investments, offshore accounts, properties acquired through questionable means. They'd bragged about their wealth, flaunting their ill-gotten gains. This Thanksgiving, Rebecca had crowed 1 year. "We're going to Aspen. First class, of course." Another time, it was a boast about a new lot. Christmas in the Caribbean, Marcus had chuckled, on our own private island. And Easter, a little shopping spree in Paris, Rebecca had declared, for some new jewels. Now, it was my turn. I slipped into the house, my heart pounding, and retrieved the documents. Everything was their bank statements, property deeds, the evidence of their crimes. I took photographs, careful not to disturb anything. Then I left, disappearing into the night, a ghost returning to haunt those who had wronged me. My revenge wouldn't be swift. It wouldn't be violent. It would be slow, methodical, and utterly devastating. They had taken everything from me. Now, it was time to take everything from them. I knew exactly where to start with their precious holiday traditions. This Thanksgiving, they wouldn't be jetting off to Aspen. Christmas wouldn't be spent on a yacht in the Caribbean, and there would be no Easter shopping spree in Paris. They would learn what it meant to truly be grounded. Christmas Eve. The same damp chill clung to the air. The same musty smell of mildew filled my nostrils. 3 Christmases had come and gone since they locked me down here. 3 years since Rebecca, with a saccharine smile, had said, "Jean, dear, you're just not yourself lately. We're doing this for your own good, for my own good." The words echoed in the silence, a cruel joke in this concrete tomb. I huddled deeper into the thin blanket, the cold seeping into my bones. The sliver of light filtering through the crack beneath the door was my only connection to the world outside. I heard muffled sounds of laughter and music drifting down from upstairs. They were having their Christmas Eve party. Julian would be there. My Julian. Rebecca had shown me pictures, taunting me with images of him with another woman, a woman she claimed was his new fiancée. "He's moved on, Jean," she'd sneered. "He's better off without you." A small, hard object pressed into my hand. I looked down. It was the hairpin I'd managed to pry loose from the floorboards weeks ago. My only weapon, my only hope. I'd been meticulously working on the lock, scraping and picking at it whenever they left me alone. Tonight I felt it give. A click. The bolt slid back. My heart pounded. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open a crack. The music was louder now, punctuated by bursts of laughter. I slipped out, my legs trembling from disuse. The basement stairs creaked ominously under my weight. I froze, listening. Nothing. I crept upwards, my hand trailing along the cold, damp wall. As I neared the top, the sounds of revelry intensified. I peered through the gap between the door and its frame. The living room was ablaze with Christmas lights, a glittering tree dominating the corner. Rebecca and Marcus were circulating amongst their guests, their faces flushed with festive cheer. And there he was, Julian. He looked older, but it was him. He wasn't laughing with the others. He stood by the window, a detached expression on his face. I took another deep breath and pushed the door open. The music faltered. Conversation died. Every head turned towards me. Rebecca's face went white. Marcus's jaw dropped. Then Rebecca recovered. "Jean, what are you doing here?" Her voice was laced with a false concern that made my stomach churn. "I'm coming home," Rebecca, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. My gaze locked on Julian. He stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. He took a step towards me, then hesitated. Jean, darling, you're not well, Marcus said, trying to sound soothing. You need to go back downstairs. He started towards me, but I held up a hand. Don't touch me, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Don't either of you come near me. I saw a flicker of fear in their eyes. Good. They should be afraid. I'm calling the police, Rebecca. And Marcus, you're both going to jail. Rebecca let out a shrill laugh. The police, darling. They won't believe you. They'll think you're delusional. We've told everyone you're unstable. She was right. I had no proof. 3 years, they had erased me. Then I looked at Julian. He was still staring at me, his expression unreadable. He hadn't spoken a word. Julian, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Tell them what they did to me. The silence hung heavy in the air. Rebecca and Marcus exchanged a panicked look. Julian took another step towards me. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a loud banging echoed through the house. The front door burst open, and 2 police officers rushed in, followed by my lawyer, and behind him my parents, who I thought were dead. My breath hitched in my throat. I stared at them, unable to comprehend. My mother rushed towards me, her eyes filled with tears. Jean, oh my darling girl. She wrapped me in a tight embrace. My lawyer stepped forward. Ms. Morris, we have a warrant for the arrest of Rebecca and Marcus Chen on charges of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and fraud. He turned to the police officers. Take them away. As Rebecca and Marcus were being handcuffed, my father explained everything. They hadn't died in that car accident. They'd been seriously injured, yes, but they had recovered. Rebecca and Marcus, distant relatives I barely knew, had used the opportunity to concoct their scheme. They'd intercepted all communication, forged documents, and convinced everyone, including Julian, that my parents were dead. They wanted our family's assets, especially the house, which was now rightfully mine again. They'd even tried to manipulate Julian into marrying someone else to solidify their control. But Julian, bless his heart, had suspected something wasn't right. He'd contacted a private investigator who, in turn, found my parents and alerted the authorities. I looked at Julian. He met my gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and love. He hadn't moved on. He hadn't believed their lies. He'd been waiting for me. The police led Rebecca and Marcus away, their faces contorted in rage and disbelief. As they disappeared through the doorway, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was finally over. I was free, and I was home, not just in the house, but with my family. This Christmas Eve, I had been given the greatest gift of all.